He didn't say goodbye. He said not now. He didn't end it. He left it open. And somehow, that hurt more than closure ever could. Because a lie wrapped in softness can echo longer than a truth spoken with cruelty. And when someone looks you in the eyes and says, "Just wait for me," something inside you freezes. You press pause on your healing. You suspend your life. Not because you're weak, but because you believe. Because hope is the last thing to die in a woman who loved deeply. That's how it begins. Not with silence, but with promises. Subtle, careful promises that don't sound like lies, but don't live like truth. He said he wasn't ready, but made you feel like he would be. He said you deserved more, but asked you to stay just a little longer. He said you were different, that what you two had was rare. And maybe it was, but rarity means nothing when someone won't choose it, won't fight for it, won't fight for it. You weren't drawn to him because he was whole. You were drawn to him because he reflected back a part of you, still waiting to be chosen. And so, you waited. Maybe 4 weeks, maybe 4 months, maybe still, but not in silence. You waited through sleepless nights, through overthinking, through stories. You kept retelling yourself just to make sense of his absence. You told yourself he was figuring things out, that he needed time, that this kind of connection was too deep to be rushed. But deep down, you also felt it. That quiet ache, that whisper that maybe he had already moved on and just hadn't told you yet. Because some people don't lie to hurt you, they lie to keep you. They lie because they can't handle the discomfort of being the villain in your story. So instead, they hand you hope like it's a gift, when really, it's a chain. You listened to the words that sounded like love. Wait for me. I'm just not ready. I don't want to lose you. And in those words, you found meaning. You found reasons to stay in the in-between. But what you didn't see is that this in-between was never temporary. It was his comfort zone. It gave him access to your energy, your heart, your presence, without ever having to give you a name, a title, or a place in his real life. And that's what the lie did. It didn't break you all at once. It starved you slowly. It kept you emotionally invested in someone who had already disconnected. It convinced you that patience was love, that waiting was noble, that your silence was strength. But love doesn't ask you to wait in the dark. Love doesn't ask for your loyalty while offering uncertainty. Love doesn't stall, only fear does. And he was afraid of letting you go, because your presence filled a void in him. Afraid of choosing you, because your depth required a level of honesty he couldn't live up to. Afraid of being alone, but also afraid of showing up fully. So he lied, not with cruelty, but with comfort. And comfort is the most dangerous lie of all, because it doesn't alarm you. It soothes you. It wraps itself around your hope and whispers just a little longer. You were not crazy for believing him. You were not desperate for holding on. You were simply human. A human being with a heart that didn't want to give up on someone who made you feel seen, even if only in moments. But moments are not love. Moments are fragments. And love, real love, is not a fragment. It is a choice, a presence, a direction. You deserved someone who didn't make you guess. Someone who didn't make your heart a waiting room. Someone who didn't weaponize the future to delay giving you what you needed now. And that's what he did. He sold you a future he never intended to build. He sold you a version of himself that only existed in the space between words and action. And you, in your softness, believed in what could be. You saw potential and mistook it for reality. That's not weakness. That's what it means to love, with vision. But now it's time to stop loving what could be and start healing from what is. He said he needed time, but time passed and nothing changed, except you. You got quieter. You stopped smiling at your phone. You started doubting yourself, and in that silence, you began to shrink. Not because of who you are, but because of who you were waiting for. The lie that kept you waiting didn't sound like a lie. It sounded like maybe, like one day, like I'm almost there. But maybe was just his way of saying never, without having to take responsibility for your pain. And here's what hurts the most. He knew you were waiting. He knew his words had weight. He knew you rearranged your heart every time he returned. He knew, and he kept doing it, because it was easier than admitting he would never be ready. He kept you tethered to a hope he never intended to fulfill, and you held on, not because you didn't see the truth, but because a part of you needed to believe there was something worth holding on for. But the truth is, you were not holding on to him. You were holding on to the version of you that believed you could be enough to change someone. And that's the most dangerous place to live, not in reality, but in the story you wrote in your mind, where he finally shows up, finally chooses you, finally keeps his word. He never will. Not because you weren't worth it, but because he never planned to. Some people don't break your heart with goodbye. They break it with maybe asterisk at some point. Something in you begins to change. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, quietly. It begins when you reread his messages and no longer feel warmth. When you hear his voice in your head and it no longer makes your stomach flutter. When you catch yourself saying the same excuses to your friends, and even you start to grow tired of hearing them. The shift is subtle, but powerful. You stop asking why he did what he did, and start asking why you allowed it for so long. You stop chasing closure from him, and start searching for it within yourself. You stop waiting for the message that might come, and begin writing your own, in the silence he left behind. And in that silence, you begin to rebuild. At first, it feels empty, like there's nothing left of you that hasn't been touched by his absence. But eventually, you find small pieces, your voice, your rhythm, your intuition, your laughter, unprompted by his presence. These are sacred. You start realizing that the greatest betrayal wasn't what he did to you, but what you began to believe about yourself in the process. That you weren't worthy of clear love, that you had to prove your value through patience, that you needed to wait in order to be chosen, but not anymore. You're waking up, and with every step you take away from the lie that kept you waiting, you reclaim parts of yourself he never even tried to know. You are not what he postponed. You are what you're becoming now, in the freedom that comes when you no longer accept love wrapped in delay. Before we go deeper, if you've ever felt stuck between what was promised and what never came, there's something that might help. The Jung Method is a path to emotional clarity and healing that shows you how to let go of what logic can't explain, but your heart still carries. The link is pinned in the first comment if you're ready to begin. Now breathe, because something inside you has already started shifting. You feel it every time you resist checking your phone, every time you stop crafting imaginary responses in your mind, every time you remember his voice but choose not to reply to its echo. You're not the same woman who waited. That woman believed that love was something you earned by staying loyal to a maybe. That woman believed that patience would transform silence into certainty. But you are not that woman anymore. You are becoming the version of yourself that sees clearly, even through tears, that feels the ache and still chooses to walk forward. And that journey is not linear. Some days you miss him more than you want to admit. Some nights you imagine what it would feel like if he suddenly showed up and said all the right things. Some mornings your body still reaches for the memory before your mind reminds you that he was never really there. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without needing to return. It means seeing the truth and still choosing peace. It means letting the dream die so that something real can be born. Carl Jung taught that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And maybe that's what this entire experience has been pushing you toward. Not toward him, but toward you. Toward the self you abandoned while waiting to be chosen. Toward the voice you silenced so his could feel louder. Toward the needs you minimized just to keep him comfortable. You thought this was about him, but it was always about you. About your hunger to be met, your willingness to believe, your hope that love could grow in a place where there was no soil. Only stone. And now you see that it wasn't love that kept you waiting. It was fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of starting over. Fear that if you let go, no one else would see your worth. But those fears were never yours. They were planted by the absence he left in you. And you no longer have to water them, because you were never hard to love. You were just offering your love to someone unequipped to receive it. Someone who didn't have the capacity to meet your heart where it stood. Someone who mistook your loyalty for convenience and your forgiveness for permission. But now you're done. Not with bitterness, not with rage, just done with shrinking yourself into fragments for a love that never intended to be whole. And here's something you might not realize yet. The moment you stopped waiting was the moment you became unforgettable. Not to him, but to yourself. You will remember this, not with shame, but with power. You'll remember how close you came to losing yourself. And you'll remember how you didn't. That is your strength. That is your beauty. Not in how long you waited, but in how deeply you finally returned. And yes, he may come back. He may reach out. They always do. The silence becomes too loud. The attention fades. And suddenly, they remember the woman who made them feel seen. But when that moment comes, you won't be in the same place. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not energetically. You'll remember what it cost to wait for someone who never planned to arrive. You'll remember how heavy it felt to carry the weight of a story that never belonged to you. And you'll say no, not out of revenge, but out of reverence for the woman you've become. This is not just healing, this is transformation, the kind of inner alchemy that turns silence into clarity and pain into power. You didn't lose yourself. You uncovered her beneath the layers of waiting. Now you get to love from a place of fullness. You get to write new stories without building them on someone else's empty promises. You get to stop waiting and start living. You no longer need to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself, and in that choice, you become free. Free from the lie. Free from the hope that became a cage. Free from the man who never came, but also never truly left. Because now, he doesn't get to stay in your heart rent-free. He doesn't get to live in your silence. He doesn't get to pull your strings with old promises. You've cut them, one by one, and what's left is yours, untouched, sacred, whole. You can miss him and still not want him back. You can remember the good moments and still know they weren't enough. You can grieve what was lost and still honor what's coming. You are allowed to outgrow the lie. You are allowed to be done. So if you're still holding on to a hope he handed you but never intended to keep, this is your permission to put it down, not because you stopped loving, but because you started healing, and that, more than anything, is the love you've been waiting for all along. Asterisk, because real love does not arrive with confusion. It does not come half-formed, dressed in apologies and delay. Real love is not a game of timing or patience or spiritual endurance. It is not a puzzle to be solved or a storm to be survived. Real love meets you. It sees you. It claims you. It does not ask you to wait while it figures itself out. It does not punish you for having needs or label. Your depth has intensity. You are not here to be the holding space for someone else's indecision. You are not here to be the background comfort in someone's unfinished journey. You are here to live fully, to feel deeply, and to be met with presence, not potential. So if there's still a part of you wondering if he meant what he said, remember this. Love does not leave you guessing. It does not speak in riddles. It does not disappear when things get real. The man who says wait but never arrives is not a mystery. He is an answer, and the answer is no. No to delay. No to being a placeholder. No to pouring yourself into something that only ever offered emptiness in return. And that no is sacred. Because every time you say no to what is not love, you say yes to something greater. You say yes to your healing. You say yes to your intuition. You say yes to the version of you that no longer builds a home inside a maybe. Let him go. Let the lie unravel. Let the space fill with your truth. Because you were never meant to wait for love. You were meant to become it.